on a day when I really shouldn't have met anyone. The sky that day was gray and gloomy, the typical late autumn weather in Boston. A cold wind slapped against my face, carrying the damp smell of rotting leaves and the rain that had just stopped. The university campus was almost empty. Students were either in class or hiding somewhere in warm cafes. I was standing in front of the old dormitory building, gripping my phone so tightly that my knuckles had turned white. Liam's last message was still there. "We need to stop." Just 4 words. 4 words that were enough to choke everything. 2 years. 2 years with Liam. From shared study sessions, skipping class for late-night snacks, to quick hugs in empty hallways. Everything ended with one cold text message. No explanation. No phone call. Just gone. I don't know how long I had been standing there until a voice cut through my thoughts. "You okay?" I turned around, a little annoyed at being disturbed. And then I saw him. Nico. My first impression of Nico was that he was too striking to appear on a terrible day like this. He was a little taller than me with light blonde hair. Not dyed but natural. Slightly messy, as if the wind had just tossed it around. His eyes were blue. The kind of blue you only see in advertisement photos, and they looked straight at me with a mix of curiosity and caution. He was wearing a gray hoodie, hands stuffed in the pockets, standing in a relaxed way that suggested nothing in the world could bother him for long. The complete opposite of me at that moment. "Do I look okay?" I replied, my voice hoarse. Nico shrugged and took a step closer. "No," he said bluntly, but I figured asking was still more polite than just standing there staring. I let out a short, dry laugh. "You were staring." "Yeah," Nico admitted without any shame, "but I'm also asking." For some reason, his straightforwardness didn't annoy me. There was something about the way he spoke. No beating around the bush, no fakeness. That made me feel a little lighter. I sighed and leaned my back against the wall. "I got dumped," I said. Nico nodded like that was the most obvious answer. "Girlfriend?" I shook my head. "Boyfriend?" A short silence. I was used to other people's reactions, surprise or worse, awkwardness. But Nico only frowned slightly, as if he was thinking. "Then you deserve to be treated better," he said. Simple. Normal. Not a hint of judgment. I looked at him a little longer. "Do you say that to everyone who just got dumped?" "No," Nico replied. "Only to the ones who look like they're about to collapse right in front of the dorm." I laughed again, this time for real. "Thanks, I guess." "No problem." Nico tilted his head. "What's your name?" "Quentin." "Nico." We shook hands. A quick handshake, but long enough for me to notice how warm his hand was against the cold seeping into my skin. "Quentin," Nico repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. "What's your major?" "Literature," I answered. "Oh," Nico smiled faintly. "Sounds dangerous." "Why?" "Because literature majors tend to overthink everything," he said. "And that doesn't help at all after getting dumped." I smirked. "What about you? What's your major?" "Sports," Nico replied. "Football." I nodded. That explained his build, broad shoulders, solid frame, the kind of person you could easily picture running across the field under the lights. "So do you have any advice from a athlete's perspective?" I asked, half joking. Nico thought for a moment, then said, "Yeah, standing here isn't helping." "Thanks for the deep advice." "I'm not finished." Nico smirked. "Let's go get a drink." I blinked. "With you?" "Yeah," Nico said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "You look like you need a stranger to talk to more than you need to be alone." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to refuse. I wasn't the type to go drinking with someone I just met. But the other part, the part that had just been abandoned and felt completely empty, didn't want to go back to my room and face the silence. "Just one drink," I said. Nico smiled. "Just one drink." The nearby cafe was warmer than I remembered. We sat in the corner. The soft golden light fell across Nico's face, making his eyes look even brighter. I talked. Not everything, but enough. About Liam. About how we met. About how I thought it would last longer. Nico didn't interrupt. He only nodded occasionally or asked short questions. Do you know why? I'm not sure, I said. Maybe I wasn't enough. Nico looked at me, his gaze sharpening. Don't say that. I stayed quiet. Look, Nico continued, his voice lower. People leave for a lot of reasons, but it's rarely because the other person wasn't enough. You say that like you know exactly what it feels like. Nico gave a faint smile. Maybe because I've been on the other side. I looked at him. You were the one who left? Nico didn't answer right away. Yeah, he finally said. And trust me, it's not always as easy as you think. A silence settled between us, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was just enough. I don't know why, but sitting there across from Nico, I felt something I hadn't felt all day. Lighter, like, even if only a little, I wasn't completely alone anymore. And I had no idea that Nico wouldn't just be a stranger who happened to appear. He would become the replacement. I don't remember what time I got back to my room that night. I only remember that the moment the door closed behind me, the familiar silence rushed in. But this time, it wasn't as heavy as before. Maybe because Nico's voice was still in my head. Straightforward, calm, not trying to comfort me in some fake way. And strangely, I missed it. I tossed my backpack onto the chair, lay down on my back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed. A message. Not from Liam. My heart skipped a beat before I realized whose name was on the screen. Nico, you home yet? I stared at the words for a few seconds. We had only met a few hours ago. There was no reason for him to text me. But he did. I typed back. Yeah. Less than 10 seconds later, the next message appeared. Good. I didn't want to wake up tomorrow and read about a literature major freezing to death in front of the dorm. I laughed to myself. Thanks for the weird concern. No problem. I'm very good at caring in an annoying way. I hesitated for a second, then asked, do you always do this? Do what? Start conversations with strangers and invite them for drinks. A pause. Then, no. I raised an eyebrow. So why today? This time, Nico took longer to reply. When the message appeared, my heart beat a little faster. Because you looked like you needed it. Simple, but true. I didn't reply right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wasn't sure I wanted this conversation to end. Finally, I typed, yeah, maybe. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Go to sleep, Quentin. Yeah. I put my phone down but didn't turn off the screen right away. Nico's name was still there. A stranger, but not quite a stranger anymore. In the days that followed, I tried to return to normal life. Go to class, do assignments, pretend everything was fine. But in reality, it wasn't. Everything carried traces of Liam. The table in the library where we used to sit. The corner restaurant where we used to share a plate of fries. Even the path to the lecture hall reminded me of the times he walked beside me, our hands brushing. I hated it. I hated that everything was tied to someone who had already left. And maybe that's why I started texting Nico more. First, just short messages. What did you train today? Running. And almost died. Sounds fun. No, but I look really cool when I almost die. I smiled. The messages gradually got longer. From school stuff and food to random questions like, if you could leave this place right now, where would you go? California. Sunday beach. No essays. Sounds reasonable. What about you? Stay here. Why? Because I don't hate it here. I just used to like it more before. Nico didn't reply right away. When the message came, it was shorter than I expected. You'll like it again. I wasn't sure, but I wanted to believe it. A week later, I saw Nico again. Not by chance. On purpose. He texted me in the afternoon. Free tonight. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Yeah. Come to the practice field. I don't play football. I know. So what am I supposed to do there? Sit and watch. I frowned. Sounds boring. Trust me, not when I'm playing. I laughed. Very confident, huh? No, it's just the truth. I should have refused. I really should have, but I didn't. The practice field glowed under the evening lights. The air was colder, but full of energy. The sound of cleats on grass. The rolling of the ball. Shouts calling to each other. I stood at the edge of the field, hands in my jacket pockets, feeling completely out of place in this world. Until... Quentin. I turned. Nico was running toward me, hair wet with sweat, his practice jersey clinging to his body. He stopped in front of me, breathing lightly. You came. Yeah, I replied. I'm still wondering why. Nico smiled. Because you wanted to. I didn't argue. Sit over there. Nico pointed to the small bleachers. I've got 20 more minutes. I'm not promising I won't fall asleep. If you fall asleep, I'll throw the ball at your head. Sounds tempting. Nico smirked, then jogged back to the field. I sat down, resting my chin on my hand, and watched. And then, I started to understand why he was so confident. Nico played like he belonged there. Fast, precise, powerful. Every time he touched the ball, everything around him seemed to slow down. I wasn't someone who understood sports, but I could see. He was good, really good. And the dangerous part was, I wasn't just watching a football game. I was watching him, the way his body moved, the way he smiled at his teammates, the way the lights reflected on his sweat-covered skin. I swallowed hard. No, not again. I couldn't. Staring at me? Nico's voice suddenly sounded right in front of me. I startled. When did you even get here? Long enough to see you weren't bored at all, Nico said, sitting down beside me. I looked away. I was just killing time. Yeah, Nico smiled faintly, by staring at me. I glared at him. You're way too confident. But am I wrong? I stayed silent. Nico tilted his head and looked at me more closely. You're doing better, he said. I blinked. What do you mean? Last week, Nico said. You looked like you were about to fall apart. He paused for a second. Now, you just look like you're trying not to overthink too much. I let out a long breath. Progress, huh? Yeah, Nico nodded. Progress. A comfortable silence. Then Nico spoke, his voice softer. Quentin. Yeah. You don't have to replace anyone. My heart skipped. I'm not talking about someone else. Nico cut in. I'm talking about you. I looked at him. Nico's eyes right now were serious enough that I couldn't look away. Don't try to become the version you think someone else wants, he said. Just be you. I didn't know what to say. I only knew that something inside my chest had just shifted. Lightly, but clearly. And for the first time since Liam left, I started to wonder. Maybe Nico wasn't just a replacement. He was something completely different. I started looking forward to Nico's messages. It happened so slowly that I didn't even realize it at first. It was just, every morning when I woke up, I unconsciously checked my phone. Every time it buzzed, my heart would skip a beat, even though I didn't want to admit it. And every time Nico's name appeared, Everything inside me softened. One evening, I was sitting in the library, trying to finish an essay on a novel I had already read 3 times but still couldn't focus on. The laptop screen was blinding white. The cursor blinked. My head was completely empty. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. Nico, you still alive? I smiled. Barely. Sounds like the essay is killing you. It's torturing me. Come outside. I frowned. I'm working on my paper. No, you're sitting there staring at the screen and hating yourself. I stared at the message. Damn, he was right. Are you stalking me? No need. I just guessed. I sighed and leaned back in my chair. I have to submit it tomorrow. And you'll write better if your head isn't clogged. A pause. Then, come outside. 10 minutes. I looked around the library. Everyone else was still bent over their books, focused and disciplined. I should stay. But where? The reply came almost immediately. Outside. I blinked. You're here. Yeah. My heart beat a little faster. Nico was leaning against the railing right in front of the library. The streetlight illuminated his face, highlighting his sharp features and blue eyes that looked straight at me as I stepped out. You actually came, Nico said, pushing off the railing. You actually showed up, I replied. Nico smirked. Let's go. Where? For a walk. That's it. Yeah. I shook my head but followed him anyway. We walked along the path around campus. Night had fallen. The air was colder, but pleasant. There was no loud noise, only the sound of our footsteps and occasionally dry leaves being swept by the wind. Do you always do this? I asked. Do what? Pull people out of the library halfway through. No, Nico said. Only when they look like they're about to explode. Do I look that bad? Not bad. Nico tilted his head to look at me. Just too tense. I smiled faintly. What about you? Don't you have assignments? I do, Nico replied. But I'm not doing them. Sounds like a great strategy. Very effective at keeping me from going insane. I shook my head. You're really weird. Thanks. That wasn't a compliment. It is to me. We were quiet for a while, but this time the silence didn't make me uncomfortable. It was comfortable, like I didn't need to force myself to say anything to keep the conversation alive. Quentin, Nico spoke after a while. Yeah? Have you thought about him today? I knew who he was talking about. I didn't answer right away. Yeah, I finally admitted. How many times? I didn't count. Nico nodded, as if that was the answer he had expected. Less than last week? I thought about it. Yeah. Then that's good. Good. I frowned. I'm still thinking about him. Yeah, Nico said, but less. He stopped and turned to look at me. That's how it works. I looked at Nico and felt something in his words very real. You talk like you've been through it. Nico smiled faintly. I already told you I have. I hesitated a little. Do you regret it? Regret leaving? Nico asked back. Yeah. He didn't answer right away. We kept walking. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Then, yeah, Nico said. I turned to him. But not the way you think. What do you mean? Nico took a breath, as if he was carefully considering something. I don't regret the decision, he said slowly. I regret the way I did it. My heart sank a little. Liam's message flashed through my mind. We need to stop. I get it, I said softly. Nico looked at me. You didn't deserve it done that way. I smiled bitterly. Maybe I did something wrong. Quentin. Nico's voice dropped. I looked up. Don't try to find fault in yourself just to justify someone else hurting you. Those words hit me straight. I looked away, staring down the path ahead. I just wanted to understand. Not everything has a clear answer, Nico said. But not having an answer is worse. Yeah, Nico admitted. But sometimes, you have to create your own answer. I let out a long breath. Sounds exhausting. Yeah, Nico smiled faintly. But you're doing pretty well. I glanced at him. You always say that. Because you always do it. I stayed silent. And then, without knowing why, I asked. Nico. Yeah. If you could go back, would you do it differently? He stopped walking. I stopped too. Nico looked at me, his eyes deeper than usual. Yes, he said. You would stay. A silence. The wind blew past, carrying the cold between us. Nico shook his head slightly. No. My heart stopped. So what would you do differently? Nico looked straight into my eyes. At the very least, I wouldn't make that person feel like they were just a replaceable option. I stood still. I don't know why, but that sentence made my chest tighten, like something had just touched a spot I had never dared to look at directly. Nico turned and continued walking. Come on, he said softly. Took me a few seconds to catch up. But from that moment, a thought began to form in my mind. Vague, dangerous, and I wasn't sure I had the courage to face it. Was I turning Nico into a replacement? That thought followed me for the days after. Not loud, not clear, but always there. Was I using Nico to fill the empty space Liam left? I hated that question, because I wasn't sure of the answer. You're looking at me like I'm about to disappear. Nico's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. We were sitting in the school cafeteria, our trays of food almost untouched in front of us. I blinked, realizing I had been staring at him for too long. I was just thinking, I said. Dangerous, Nico smirked. You think too much. How many times have you said that? Not enough for you to stop. I sighed and poked at a fry with my fork. Give me a reason to stop. Nico tilted his head, observing me more closely. Do you want the real reason or the easy-to-hear reason? Try the real one. Nico didn't answer right away. He leaned back in his chair, eyes never leaving me. You're scared, Nico said. I froze. Scared of what? Scared that if you stop thinking about your ex, then everything between you two will really be over. I clenched my hand. And, I asked, my voice lower. And if it really ends, Nico continued, then you'll have to face starting over from the beginning. I smiled bitterly. Doesn't sound very appealing. No, Nico agreed. But that's the only way. I stayed silent. He always did this, saying things I didn't want to hear, but couldn't deny. I'm not sure I'm ready, I said quietly. Nico didn't argue. He just nodded lightly. No one ever is. A silence. I looked down at the table, then back at Nico. What if I'm doing it? Doing what? Using you, I said slowly, as a replacement. The air between us grew heavy. Nico didn't speak right away. That made my heart beat faster. I'm not. I started, then stopped. I don't want to do that. Nico breathed out softly. I know. But what if I'm doing it without realizing? Nico looked at me for a long time. His eyes weren't angry or annoyed, just serious. Quentin, Nico said, his voice low, do you want me to be a replacement? That question was too direct. I opened my mouth, but no answer came immediately, and that was exactly what scared me. I don't know, I admitted. Nico nodded as if he had expected it. Then you're not ready. I frowned. Not ready for what? For anything with me. Those words felt like a cut. Not painful right away, but deep. I'm not saying I want. I stopped, flustered. Want what? Nico asked gently. I looked at him, then looked away. I don't know, I said honestly. Nico smiled faintly, but there was no mockery. At least you're being honest. What about you? I asked suddenly. What do you want? That question made Nico go quiet. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then he said, I want you to stop looking at me like I'm just an empty space that needs to be filled. I swallowed hard. I'm not. Maybe you're not doing it on purpose, Nico cut in. But sometimes, it still feels that way. I looked straight at him, and for the first time, I saw Nico not completely calm anymore. There was something in his eyes, a bit of defensiveness, a bit of exhaustion. I don't want to hurt you, I said. Then don't, Nico replied immediately. Easier said than done. No, Nico shook his head. It's very simple. I let out a dry laugh. You don't seem like someone who makes everything simple. The moment those words left my mouth, I knew I had touched something. Nico froze, just for a moment, but it was enough for me to notice. Sorry, I said quickly. It's fine, Nico replied, but his voice was lower. A heavy silence fell. I hated it. I hated that things between us had suddenly become awkward. I don't want to lose you, I said, almost without thinking. Nico looked at me. This time his eyes softened a little. You won't lose me, Nico said, unless you turn me into someone else. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, Nico paused, as if searching for the right words. If you keep looking at me through the shadow of your ex, then eventually, you won't see me anymore. I stayed silent. Those words hit the mark, because I knew they were true. I'm trying, I said softly. I know, Nico replied. He tilted his head and looked at me more carefully. And I'm still here. A simple sentence, but enough to make my chest tighten. Why? I asked. Nico smiled faintly. Do you really want to know? I nodded. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, Because I like you, Quentin. The world seemed to slow down. I stopped breathing, stopped moving. I just looked at him. Not the kind of like you can easily label as friendship, Nico continued, his voice still calm. And I'm not expecting you to answer right away. My heart was pounding. Nico breathed out. I wanted you to know. The air between us became heavy, but not because it was uncomfortable, because there were too many things still unsaid. I started, but there were no words after that, because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what I was feeling. I only knew that everything had just changed, and I couldn't go back to the way it was before.